The grey sky reflected the tension in Sophia's heart as she set the table in the grand hall of the mansion where she had worked as a maid for almost 3 years. The house, with its luxurious furnishings and sophisticated decorations, had always made her feel like an outsider. But today, something was different. An unexpected conversation, soon to happen, would change the course of her life forever. Sophia had grown up in a small town, far from the glittering lights of high society. Her past, hidden for years, was beginning to intertwine with her present in ways she never imagined. When she was hired by the St. Clair family, neither she nor her employers knew who she really was. The daughter of a tech magnate, one whose companies were among the most powerful in the world. Sophia had always known her origins, but chose to keep it a secret. Her father, Richard St. Clair, was a ruthless man, determined to build an empire that would never pass through the hands of a woman, especially his daughter. Therefore, she chose to distance herself and live an ordinary life, even though she was capable of having everything money could offer. But Sophia's life in the world of high society was about to be turned upside down. Billionaire Alexander Torres, a shrewd investor and head of a conglomerate competing with her father's empire, was beginning to appear frequently at gala events and business meetings. He had already identified the St. Clair family's weakness, the lack of a worthy heir to take over the business and lead the next generation. And Sophia, even though she was just an employee in the mansion, was the key to destroying everything the St. Clairs had built. One rainy night, when the mansion was nearly deserted, Sophia received an unexpected visitor. Alexander, with his imposing presence and calculating gaze, appeared before her, revealing what he already knew. He recognized her. Sophia tried to hide her terror, but his expression was unmistakable. He knew her secret, and he was willing to use it. "So you know who I am, Sophia?" Alexander said with a cold smile, his piercing blue eyes fixed on her. "And I know who you really are. You're not just a simple maid. You're Richard St. Clair's daughter, the heir to everything." She swallowed, the shock on her face making her hands tremble. What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice thick with trepidation, though she was aware the truth would always come out. "I want control of your family's empire, Sophia, and you, my dear, will be the key to that. Your family never accepted you, never trusted you to take your father's place. But I see the potential you have, and I can help you take what is rightfully yours." Sophia felt the weight of those words. The power, the empire that could be hers, was within her grasp. But what should she do? Help this man who was her family's enemy? He was right. She would never be accepted by her father, always a shadow of what he wanted her to be. But at the same time, surrendering to Alexander's power play could be more treacherous than she imagined. "And what do you expect in return?" she asked, her mind already full of doubts. "Simple," he replied, his eyes twinkling. "I will help you conquer the empire, but you will have to fight by my side. The power will be ours, but trust between us will be key." "I am not a man of empty words, Sophia." The two stared at each other, the tension between them palpable. Sophia knew her options were limited, but what she didn't know was that as this alliance formed, she would begin to lose herself in a game of betrayal, love, and greed that would test her in ways she never imagined. The power was seductive, but the price would be higher than she could have calculated. The days following Alexander's visit were filled with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Sophia tried to focus on her daily tasks, but the weight of Alexander's proposal wouldn't leave her alone. She knew that by accepting his alliance, she would be moving further away from her family and everything she had ever known. However, the idea of Wu taking control of the empire, of finally possessing the power her father had never given her, held a dangerous allure. The following night, after another business meeting with her father at a luxurious hotel in the city, Sophia was summoned by Alexander again. He was waiting for her at an exclusive restaurant, and although she tried to maintain her composure, his presence made her uncomfortable. He was charming with that gentle smile, but his eyes always held a dangerous intensity. Sitting at the table with him is like entering a game where the rules aren't clear. "Sophia," she thought as she walked toward the table. The doubt and fear were palpable, but she forced herself to be rational. He had shown her a path, and now there was no turning back. When Sophia arrived at the table, Alexander greeted her with a cool but polite smile. He gestured for her to sit, and she did so. The conversation began casually but soon deepened. "You're overthinking things, Sophia," Alexander said, watching her closely. "The only way to defeat your family and take control is to act. What your father never understood is that power isn't given. It's taken. I'm not offering you a simple partnership. I'm offering you an empire." Sophia stared at the wineglass in her hands, trying to control the uneasiness consuming her. "And you think I'm capable of taking what's mine, even without my family's support?" Alexander shrugged, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "You don't need your family. The empire doesn't belong to them. Sophia, it belongs to whoever has the courage to take it. You have more than they can imagine." Sophia felt the pressure of his words. There was something in his gaze that made her believe what he was saying. But she knew she couldn't act on impulse. The game he proposed wasn't just a matter of business. It was a personal and emotional battle. Before he could respond, Alexander interrupted, turning to the waiter who had just approached. "I know what to do, Wet Forbes," he said, handing the man a sealed envelope. Sophia watched silently, curious and wary at the same time. What was going on? She soon discovered when the waiter left, and Alexander leaned over the table, speaking in a low voice. "This is the first step. Sophia, a quiet action that will shake the control your family still has over your companies. But don't worry, it's nothing you can't handle." She swallowed hard. What he was suggesting was a coup, a dirty trick that could cause her father to lose control of some of his most valuable companies, but it also meant her future would be irreversibly altered. "What if I do not accept?" Sophia asked, her voice firm but doubt still weighing on her heart. Alexander smiled with a cold glint in his eyes. "Don't worry, Sophia. What we're doing here isn't a choice. It's inevitable. What you need to decide is whether you'll lead alongside me or be a bystander to what's to come." Those words echoed in Sophia's mind throughout the night. She knew her life would never be the same after that conversation. And although she still had doubts about Alexander's methods, she couldn't deny that the lure of power was too strong to resist. She also knew that if she refused, she would lose the chance to do something great, to change her life forever. The next morning, as she stood in the mansion's garden, Sophia thought about everything she had discussed with Alexander. The weight of her decision weighed heavily on her, but the desire to show her father that she was not merely a spectator in his own life drove her. She wanted, more than anything, to prove herself capable of ruling the empire he had built. But am I willing to pay the price? She wondered. The game had begun, and she was about to make a choice that would define her future. Sophia had never known silence could be so deafening. When she woke that morning, the weight of her decision felt more real than ever. Alexander's offer still echoed in her mind. "The power is yours, but loyalty will come at a price." She wondered what he really wanted from her. He seemed so sure of his intentions, so trustworthy, but it was impossible. Not to sense he had something more in mind, or something beyond simply helping to destroy the St. Clair Empire. The plan would begin that night. Alexander, with his cold, calculating confidence, had decided the moment to strike had arrived. The first move would be subtle but devastating. They would exploit a technical flaw in the St. Clair company's security system to steal confidential information and compromise key contracts. The impact would be immediate, forcing Richard St. Clair to lose control of the situation. But for Sophia, this coup would have an unexpected consequence. She would become an accomplice in something that even she, with all her audacity, could not have imagined. As she prepared for the gala dinner Alexander had invited her to, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to cross a line of no return. The black dress she had chosen felt heavy, a silent symbol that her life was about to change. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes, once filled with insecurity, now reflected a determination she didn't recognize in herself. Alexander was waiting for her at the entrance to the mansion, with a smile that could be called provocative, as if he knew she had already accepted her fate. He greeted her with a soft kiss on the hand, a courtesy that, for a moment, made Sophia doubt her own intentions. But she could hesitate no longer. During dinner, the conversation flowed like a game of chess, where every word seemed calculated. Alexander talked about his business strategies, his vision for the future. But Sophia knew this wasn't just about economics. They were, in fact, dancing around what would be a devastating attack on her own family's empire. She felt her father's eyes on her throughout the event, though Richard St. Clair tried to hide his discomfort. He knew something was wrong, but he still had no idea what was about to happen. "Do you have any doubts about what you're doing, Sophia?" Alexander asked softly, his hand subtly touching hers under the table. The connection between them was undeniable, but the doubt also lingered. "Perhaps," she replied, her voice barely audible, "but you have convinced me that there is no other way." Alexander watched her closely, his blue eyes fixed on her, as if searching for something more in her words. He knew she was trapped, but he didn't know how much. Sophia was willing to sacrifice to have the power she'd always dreamed of. As the night wore on, Sophia couldn't shake a strange feeling. The weight of betrayal was becoming more palpable. She wasn't just betraying her father. She was betraying herself. Her desire for power was becoming a poison that ate away at her. But as the event drew to a close, something changed. As the guests dispersed and the last glass of champagne was drunk, Alexander pulled her into a private area of the mansion. He looked deeply into her eyes without saying a word, and it was then that she realized the betrayal he was preparing was not only against the St. Clair family, but also against her. He had played her game from the beginning, using Sophia as a pawn on his board, never revealing his true intentions. So you knew that at some point you would have to make a choice. "Sophia, Alexander said, his voice calm but filled with cold authority. "Thus you cannot go back. Caldi already taken control. Now you will be my ally or my enemy, or Sophia felt as if she were being crushed by an invisible weight. What he had just said wasn't just a threat. It was an ultimatum. She would no longer be a mere player on his field. With all her audacity, could not have imagined. As she prepared for the gala dinner Alexander had invited her to, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to cross a line of no return. The black dress she had chosen felt heavy, a silent symbol that her life was about to change. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes, once filled with insecurity, now reflected a determination she didn't recognize in herself. Alexander was waiting for her at the entrance to the mansion, with a smile that could be called provocative, as if he knew she had already accepted her fate. He greeted her with a soft kiss on the hand, a courtesy that, for a moment, made Sophia doubt her own intentions. But she could hesitate no longer. During dinner, the conversation flowed like a game of chess, where every word seemed calculated. Alexander talked about his business strategies, his vision for the future. But Sophia knew this wasn't just about economics. They were, in fact, dancing around what would be a devastating attack on her own family's empire. She felt her father's eyes on her throughout the event, though Richard St. Clair tried to hide his discomfort. He knew something was wrong, but he still had no idea what was about to happen. "Do you have any doubts about what you're doing, Sophia?" Alexander asked softly, his hand subtly touching hers under the table. The connection between them was undeniable, but the doubt also lingered. "Perhaps," she replied, her voice barely audible, "but you have convinced me that there is no other way." Alexander watched her closely, his blue eyes fixed on her, as if searching for something more in her words. He knew she was trapped, but he didn't know how much. Sophia was willing to sacrifice to have the power she'd always dreamed of. As the night wore on, Sophia couldn't shake a strange feeling. The weight of betrayal was becoming more palpable. She wasn't just betraying her father. She was betraying herself. Her desire for power was becoming a poison that ate away at her. But as the event drew to a close, something changed. As the guests dispersed and the last glass of champagne was drunk, Alexander pulled her into a private area of the mansion. He looked deeply into her eyes without saying a word, and it was then that she realized the betrayal he was preparing was not only against the St. Clair family, but also against her. He had played her game from the beginning, using Sophia as a pawn on his board, never revealing his true intentions. So you knew that at some point you would have to make a choice. Sophia, Alexander said, his voice calm but filled with cold authority. Thus you cannot go back. Caldi already taken control. Now you will be my ally or my enemy, or Sophia felt as if she were being crushed by an invisible weight. What he had just said wasn't just a threat. It was an ultimatum. She would no longer be a mere player on his field. Trying to hide her frustration, "You used me to destroy my family, Alexander. You promised me an empire, but in the end, what's left? I'm just another victim of all this." There was a pause on the other end of the line. And then the answer came with an even more menacing coldness. "You still don't understand, Sophia. I'm not here to destroy your family. I'm here to take what belongs to me, and you are my ally. Or the only thing left of you will be a shadow of what could have been." Sophia hung up the phone, her body trembling. She knew Alexander wasn't lying. He was manipulating everything, controlling every move, and she was deeply entangled in the web he'd woven. But something inside her still resisted. She didn't want to become a disposable pawn in such a dirty power game. As she tried to process what was happening, the doorbell rang. Richard St. Clair was standing, already heading for the door. Sophia knew that opening the door would be chaos. And that's exactly what happened. On the other side of the door stood Marcus, a trusted family lawyer, his expression tense and worried. He handed Richard a sealed envelope, his gaze avoiding Sophia's. The contents were devastating. An anonymous complaint, alleging financial fraud within the St. Clair conglomerate. And not only that, but also a series of suspicious transactions involving some of the company's highest-ranking executives. The accusation was clearer. Richard St. Clair was being accused of money laundering. "That was impossible," Richard said, trying to maintain his composure. "That is not true. Who would do that?" "I have to investigate. Mr. St. Clair, this is damaging the company's credibility. The authorities are already involved." Sophia watched silently as the room filled with tension. She knew time was running out. Alexander's every move pushed her closer to the abyss, and her father didn't know she was deeply involved. But she didn't know what else to do. The pain of loyalty and betrayal were merging, and each decision took her further away from who she wanted to be. And then the last question was asked, "Oh, and you, Sophia? Whose side are you on?" Joe Alexander's voice echoed in his mind, like a distant echo that could no longer be ignored. Dawn fell like a dark pall over the St. Clair mansion. Sophia walked down the long hallway, her trembling hands touching the cold wall, as if the solidity of the house could somehow anchor her to reality. But she already knew there was no turning back. The game was afoot, and with each step more pieces moved. Sophia's phone rang again, Alexander's number lighting up the screen. She hesitated before answering, knowing that every conversation with him took her further, away from everything she knew. But she also knew that without him, nothing would make sense right now. Chaos was the only constant now. "It's all set, Sophia." His voice sounded on the other end, sharp and confident. "Now the final blow will be struck. St. Clair can no longer ignore what's happening. You can no longer pretend to be on their side." A chill ran down her spine. "What are you saying, Alexander?" Her voice was cracking, but she forced herself to remain calm. "They'll find out it was me. They'll know you used me to destroy my own family. How they will never know the truth," he replied as if it were simple. "Because you will walk away from them. It will be your last move, Sophia. And when you do, your father will never again question your place in this empire." He had told her what she feared. She was being used not just as a pawn, but as a martyr. No matter how much she wanted to control her own narrative, her story was being written by him. "I can now do this," Sophia murmured, feeling the knot tighten in her chest. "I can out to betray my own family. You've already done that, Sophia," Alexander replied gravely. "The choice has already been made. Now you just need to decide which side of history you'll be on." He hung up, leaving her with the weight of his words echoing in her mind. Sophia knew there was no more time. She had to act. But what would happen when she made her final decision? The maze Alexander had created for her now seemed like a dead end. The next day, the tension at the St. Clair mansion was palpable. Richard, his mother, and the other family members were gathered, discussing the gravity of the situation. Sophia was there, but the distance between her and everyone seemed greater than ever. The scandal was reaching unimaginable proportions. Allegations of fraud were spreading like wildfire, and the company's shares continued to plummet. The atmosphere was tense, and Sophia could feel her father's suspicious gaze as he continued to try to figure out where the loophole lay. He knew something was wrong, and she could no longer hide her guilt. But even so, she didn't know what to do. What would happen to her when the truth came out? She could have the power she'd always dreamed of, but at what cost? While everyone gathered in the living room, discussing defense strategies, Sophia retreated to the garden. The cold wind blew against her face, and she closed her eyes for a moment, trying to process everything that was happening. Suddenly, someone appeared behind her. It was Alexander. He stood there as if he knew exactly where to find her, as if he were a constant shadow in her life. "Sophia," he said, his voice soft but carrying a veiled threat, "you know what you need to do. The decision is in your hands now." She turned to him, her gaze filled with despair. "How I can now do this, Alexander? I can now what? Keep playing this game. I can now destroy my family." Alexander smiled, and that smile was like a sharp blade. "You're not destroying your family. You're saving yourself. You'll finally be free from the burden they've placed on your shoulders. Sophia, you have power. You just need to seize it." He advanced slowly, as if his presence were too imposing to ignore. Sophia tried to pull away, but he grabbed her arm, forcing her to look him in the eye. "You think I'm a monster, don't you? But all I'm doing is showing you the right path. The empire is in ruins, Sophia, and whoever is the first to take it back will be the true winner." Those words hit her like a punch in the gut. She felt the weight of the choice even more intensely, but at the same time something inside her was shifting. Maybe Alexander was right. Maybe this really was the only way she could have everything she'd ever wanted. What if I don't want any of this anymore, Alexander?" She asked, her words filled with a courage she had known she had. He looked at her with a sad smile. "You'll want it, Sophia. When it's all over, you'll want it. Because in the end, power is the only thing that truly matters." The next morning, Sophia had no choice. Her phone rang again. She looked at the screen, knowing what awaited her on the other end. It was Alexander once again telling her what to do. But this time she was ready to listen. "It's time to act," he said, his voice calmly impersonal. "The final blow will be struck today. Your family will be exposed. The only question now is where you will be when that happens." Sophia took a deep breath. She knew what she had to do, even if it meant betraying everyone she loved. Sophia's loyalty was at a limit she hadn't even known existed. The choice was before her. She was the key to the destruction of the St. Clair Empire. But more importantly, she was about to take what should always have been hers: power. With a determined look, Sophia walked to her father's office. When he saw her, his eyes narrowed, but he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. They both knew the moment had come. "How does he know what you did, Sophia?" he said, his voice rough, but without anger. There was only a deep sadness. She approached him, her eyes fixed on his. "So I did what had to be done, Father. The Empire does know what he needs you. It needs someone who knows what to do with it." Gray. Richard St. Clair looked at his daughter as if he had just seen her for the first time. "You're making a monumental mistake." She smiled, a smile that wasn't her own, but of someone who had finally found power. "You am not wrong, Dad. You am just getting started." The sound of the doors closing behind her echoed through the mansion like distant thunder, almost symbolizing the end of an era. Sophia stood in her father's office, her hands sweaty, her eyes fixed on the man who had raised her. Richard St. Clair, the empire he had built. Everything he stood for now seemed as distant as the stars. Sophia felt the weight of the words she had just spoken. She knew the line between what was right and what was necessary had long since disappeared. When she said the empire needed someone who knew what to do with it, she was no longer speaking as a daughter. She was speaking as someone who finally understood what power truly meant. Richard was immersed in a sense of betrayal that was reflected in his eyes. "Do you think the empire will survive with a dirty trick, Sophia? With a lie built on the destruction of everything we've built?" His voice was hard, but there was a deep sadness in it. She stepped forward, her eyes now steady and unwavering. "The empire survives on those who control it, And I have learned, Father, that control is not given, it is taken. Alexander showed me that. He showed me that you saw me as a shadow, as a weakness. And now here I am, taking what has always belonged to me. Richard shook his head, a bitter smile forming on his lips. I've always protected you, Sophia. I've always believed you had something greater within you. And now you choose this? Ruin? The destruction of everything we've built? Sophia felt the weight of those words. Her throat tightened, but she didn't let them shake her. You prepared me for this moment, Father. You taught me to be strong, to be ruthless. You just didn't tell me that true power exacts a much higher price. Silence hung between them. Richard stared at his daughter, as if trying to understand what had happened, where he had failed. Sophia knew what he saw as a woman who had become a stranger, a distant figure from the daughter he had known. But she couldn't go back, not now. And then the office door burst open. Marcus, the family lawyer, walked in, looking tense. He quickly approached Richard, handing him a thick folder, his expression worried. To Amica St. Clair, there, Rahos, something else we need to discuss. Something that's what could be the end of everything. Rita, Sophia felt her body stiffen. What else could happen? She already knew the company was on the verge of collapse. But this seemed to be something even darker. Richard took the folder with trembling hands and opened it. Sophia could see the tension in his face, fear gripping him. Inside the folder were documents, detailing suspicious transactions he didn't recognize, a body of evidence that pointed to a conspiracy within St. Clair itself, and, more importantly, there was clear evidence that the documents had been manipulated from within the company itself. First, this does no one make sense. How did this happen? Toaster, Richard murmured, his voice barely audible. Sophia was paralyzed. The piece she thought she had control of now seemed to move in an unexpected way. How had this evidence come about? She felt Alexander's presence in those words, in every document there. He wasn't just attacking the St. Clair family from the outside. He was operating from the inside, manipulating the deepest structures of their company. Playing a game even dirtier than she could have imagined. I knew something was wrong, Marcus said, his voice tense. The evidence is clear. Someone within your company was working against you. Mr. St. Clair, and I fear the connection is to someone you trust. Sophia didn't know what to do. She couldn't believe what was happening. She had made the choice. But now the game was changing in ways she couldn't foresee. The betrayal, the chaos, seemed to have spiraled out of control. The real war was beginning, but the rules now seemed very different. Alexander wasn't just playing with her. He had made her a pawn, but he was also controlling the pieces of his own empire in a dark and calculated way. The empire she thought she would take over now seemed to be being consumed from within. Ikanawa do this, Fao, she whispered, feeling the weight of her decision become an unbearable burden. Theotikanamut, destroy the only thing that still has value. You've already done this. Sophia, Alexander's voice, cool and calm, reached her through the phone. And there's no turning back. Now you have two choices. Destroy your father and take over the empire, or let it all fall apart. The decision is yours. The silence in the room seemed deafening. Sophia looked at her father, now completely broken. His words lingered in her mind, echoing like a curse. Do you really understand the price of what you are doing? The pressure was unbearable. She no longer knew who to trust. Alexander was manipulating everyone around her, including her. But the power was so close within her grasp. He had always made her believe she was meant to take it, that she was destined for him. And now he was putting her at a crossroads. How I don't know who I am anymore, Dad, she said, her voice breaking. But I know what I need to do now. Sophia could barely tell where her loyalty ended and her ambition began. Sitting at her father's desk, the denunciation papers, contracts, and fraudulent transactions Alexander had orchestrated in the shadow of her trust were spread out before her. She held the power in her hands, but it didn't make her feel strong. On the contrary, the presence of that evidence was a weight she felt in every cell of her body. The decision was there, clear and brutal. She could destroy destroy everything she had ever done, or she could abandon her alliance with Alexander and try to save what was left of her family. But at the same time, her family's empire was crumbling, and there was no way to fix what was already broken. She looked at the evidence, and an internal scream seemed to rise from her soul, screaming for her to finally have what she had always wanted, absolute power. But what she didn't know was that Alexander's latest move wasn't about simply taking over the company or manipulating it. It was about test your loyalty to the end. Sophia's phone vibrated on the table, interrupting her dark thoughts. It was a message from Alexander. She hesitated before opening it, but knew it would change everything. "The final stage begins today, Sophia. Your father will never be the same. Neither will you." Sophia stood up abruptly. What was Alexander suggesting? He'd talked about a final blow, but she didn't know how far he was willing to go. He was playing with her, as he always did. But now he wanted more. He wanted to see how far her ambition would go. She needed answers. She needed to know what he was planning before she made an irreversible decision. That night, Sophia found herself in a secret meeting with Alexander. He was waiting for her in a secluded hotel, in a conference room far from the city. The place was sophisticated, but there was something somber about the atmosphere, as if this meeting were the final chapter of a story only she hadn't yet grasped. He stood there, impassive as ever, watching her with those piercing eyes. But something was different now. He wasn't trying to win her over anymore. No, he was testing her. "Sophia," he said, his voice soothing but icy cold, "you've made it this far. Now, the final decision is yours. You destroy your family and take the empire, or you stand by and watch it all crumble, watching yourself lose everything." She stared at him, unable to hide her outrage. "You think I'm here for you? That I'm playing this game because of you? I did this for myself, Alexander. I always have." Alexander smiled with morbid satisfaction, as if he had been waiting for this answer. "So you is right to do," he said softly. "Tell you about not doing this for me. You're for doing this for yourself, for all the power you have ever wanted. You're so close to finally having it all, Sophia. What more do you want?" But before she could respond, Alexander stepped closer, his gaze fixed on hers. "Oh, I showed you the way. But what you have not realized yet is that, in the end, this game is now about empire. It is not about money or power. It is about you. It is about seeing how far you'll go, how far your ambition can take you." "Arrow." Sophia shuddered. She finally realized what was happening. Alexander didn't want her to win together. He wanted her to be consumed by power until the end, to lose herself in the very game she helped create. Alexander's smile widened. He wasn't just manipulating business. He was manipulating his soul, testing how far it could be corrupted. "Are you scared, Sophia?" he whispered, as if he saw the conflict within her manifesting in her gaze. She took a deep breath, her decision already made. Anger, shame, and guilt swirled in her heart, but she couldn't turn back. It was the end of the game. Would she take the final step or fall into the trap Alexander had set for her? "I'm not afraid, Alexander," she replied with a defiant look. "I'll take what's mine. I'm no longer your puppet." Interrupting her dark thoughts. It was a message from Alexander. She hesitated before opening it, but knew it would change everything. "The final stage begins today, Sophia. Your father will never be the same. Neither will you." Sophia stood up abruptly. What was Alexander suggesting? He'd talked about a final blow, but she didn't know how far he was willing to go. He was playing with her, as he always did. But now he wanted more. He wanted to see how far her ambition would go. She needed answers. She needed to know what he was planning before she made an irreversible decision. That night, Sophia found herself in a secret meeting with Alexander. He was waiting for her in a secluded hotel, in a conference room far from the city. The place was sophisticated, but there was something somber about the atmosphere, as if this meeting were the final chapter of a story only she hadn't yet grasped. He stood there, impassive as ever, watching her with those piercing eyes. But something was different now. He wasn't trying to win her over anymore. No, he was testing her. "Sophia," he said, his voice soothing but icy cold, "you've made it this far. Now, the final decision is yours. You destroy your family and take the empire, or you stand by and watch it all crumble, watching yourself lose everything. She stared at him, unable to hide her outrage. You think I'm here for you? That I'm playing this game because of you? I did this for myself, Alexander. I always have. Alexander smiled with morbid satisfaction, as if he had been waiting for this answer. So you is right to do, he said softly. How you are not doing this for me. You're doing this for yourself, for all the power you have ever wanted. You're so close to finally having it all, Sophia. What more do you want? But before she could respond, Alexander stepped closer, his gaze fixed on hers. Oh, I showed you the way. But what you have not realized yet is that, in the end, this game is now about empire. It is not about money or power. It is about you. It is about seeing how far you'll go, how far your ambition can take you. Row. Sophia shuddered. She finally realized what was happening. Alexander didn't want her to win together. He wanted her to be consumed by power until the end, to lose herself in the very game she helped create. Alexander's smile widened. He wasn't just manipulating business. He was manipulating his soul, testing how far it could be corrupted. Are you scared, Sophia? He whispered, as if he saw the conflict within her manifesting in her gaze. She took a deep breath, her decision already made. Anger, shame, and guilt swirled in her heart, but she couldn't turn back. It was the end of the game. Would she take the final step or fall into the trap Alexander had set for her? I'm not afraid, Alexander, she replied with a defiant look. I'll take what's mine. I'm no longer your puppet. Of the trust I had destroyed in pursuit, of what I thought was my only reason for existence, was consuming me. I don't know who I am anymore, Alexander. I don't know what I really wanted anymore. I have the power, but it seems the only thing it has brought me is emptiness. I heard his laugh, but there was no joy in his voice. Only the cold satisfaction of someone who knew what was coming before it even began. Do you see what happened, Sophia? What I wanted wasn't to give you the empire. I wanted to show you that in the end, power consumes everything you have. And now you're seeing the truth. What will you do with it, with the power you so desired? I swallowed hard, the weight of the world seeming to have fallen upon me. What Alexander didn't understand, or perhaps knew all too well, was that the choice to take the empire hadn't been mine. Not in the end. I was being consumed by the same ambition that had driven me to make every wrong decision. I was looking at my life and I didn't know who I was anymore. What do you want from me now? My voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. What you do from here, Sophia, is your choice. But you know what happened. You know there's no going back. The empire is yours, but what's left of it? Your family, your roots are destroyed. Now what will you do with it? I looked out the window once more. I didn't know. I didn't know if power was truly worth it, or if everything I'd done was wrong. I'd destroyed everything I loved, and now I found myself in the loneliest position possible. I was at the top, but there was no one with me. The empire was in my hands, but it was as empty as my soul. The irony was there, clear as day. I sought power, but what I actually got was the loss of everything that truly mattered. First, I don't know, Alexander. First, I don't know what to do now. And for the first time, I realized that Alexander's true victory wasn't giving me the empire. He didn't want me to have power. He wanted me to lose myself in it as I had. The call ended, and I stood there alone, looking at the empire I had conquered, longing for what I could never have back. Power had transformed me into someone I didn't recognize. Now I was just the owner of an empty empire, soulless, without ties, without anything, and perhaps that was the biggest price I had to pay. What would you do if you had everything you ever wanted, but didn't know what to do with it? Leave a comment, we'd love to hear your opinion. Ambition has its price, and what we want is not always what we need.